The theme for today is academic development and standards for technology-enhanced learning, resistance or assurance. Dr. Sarah Stein is the Director of Distance Learning at the University of Otago in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Her background is in education, and her experience includes being a school teacher, a curriculum advisor, and academic staff developer. I came across the article that this presentation is based on and thought it was very useful. So that's the reason why I invited Sarah. And that article was written with a couple of co-authors as well. So thanks again, Sarah, for joining us, and over to you now.
Oh, thank you, Henk. Thank you for the invitation. My little bit here today is a bit more sort of researchy than Michael's was. Michael's was very sort of down to earth and very interesting. So hopefully this is also of interest to you. It came out of the article was the result of a piece of research that a group of us did a few years ago now, and this is the result of, oh, well, I'll tell you in a moment about what it is, but it sounds very negative, I guess. I looked at it, at the title again, when Henk asked me to do this, and I thought, oh, this is all very negative, isn't it? It's all about resistance. It's all about, even looking at the extracts from the interviews and the questionnaire comments that we got, they're all negative things. But it is about resistance, and we're facing resistance all the time when we're dealing with staff. But it's an interesting thing to work with, and it doesn't go away. So today, I just thought I'd take you for a quick trip through the article by way of this kind of overview. When we get to number 3, really it's outside the article. It's more about teacher professional development, about some models and ideas that I tend to use and have worked up in the past, and I guess are the founding ideas, some of the founding ideas that prompted this article and other things that I have done. But I thought you might like to see some of those things, just as starters for some questions or some thoughts or some discussion that you might want to throw into the mix. All right, so there's the paper, and I noticed that Chia has put the link to the paper in the chat there. So the original study, actually, we got a grant from Aotearoa in 2009, and we started the study. It was a 2-year thing, I think. And it was focusing on student evaluations and, you know, the teaching and course evaluations that I think every institution runs. And it was a study about academics' perceptions of those evaluation systems and everything that goes around student evaluation. And there's the motley crew. It was a joint project with 2 universities, University of Otago, University of Waikato, and the Otago Polytech. And we ran this questionnaire across both institutions. It was nice to get a 44% response rate. So we invited almost 2,500 staff members to contribute. It's a questionnaire mix with a mix of Likert scale questions and open comment questions, and we report on that study in an article in Assessment and Evaluation in Higher Education in that journal. And we also had 60 interviews. We held 60 interviews, 20 at each of the institutions. So we had lots of data there. But a little bit later, sort of a year after we finished that project, we had all this data, and the 3 of us from the 2 universities decided, let's have another look at this material here, because we know that the staff who responded to these questions in the questionnaire and those we had in our interviews were saying so many things of interest around their perceptions of and their reactions to academic staff development. And this paper from Quinn, which was published in 2012 in Studies in Higher Education, captured our attention. She used a number of interviews with staff to look at resistance, how in the way staff were talking about various things that were happening to them around the university, and in relation to academic staff development, it talked about all sorts of very, very interesting things that you could, as an academic staff developer, use kind of to add to your knowledge about where staff are positioned, and understand a little bit more about how then their reactions to the various things we try to encourage staff to do and to engage in. So we took our data, that is the open comment data and the interview transcripts, but we only used the university ones to look for these evidence of resistance to academic staff development. And of course, this was all around student evaluations, even though we were then able to kind of cut across that and look at the ideas more generally. Oops. So these were the 4 resistance areas that Quinn identified. Things that were related to the discipline and staff connection, very close connection, seeing themselves as part of a discipline and professional community in that way. There was an area of discourse that talked about student deficit and school or institutional deficit. There was another area around performativity and accountability and meeting demands and key performance outcomes type of stuff. And the other one was about skills, about teaching. Being able to teach is knowing a series of skills and being able to perform them. So I'll just go through very quickly each of those discourses and how we use that, and showing how with using those different discourses, we interrogated our data and saw examples of similar things that Quinn did. We saw other layers of things coming out as well. So here we are, the disciplinary discourse. I've summarized the key points from Quinn's paper around disciplinary discourse. I probably just added, we modified it a little bit, but the focus is on the discipline. There are staff who think and who believe that the discipline, or in their actions, the discipline shapes everything they see and filters their perceptions of whatever they encounter. And so as an academic staff developer, your credibility is questioned very easily. And another big thing for them tends to be their academic freedom. This is good for our students because it's a pedagogical decision, and I know because you don't know anything about maths education, and I do because I'm a mathematician. So it's that kind of thing. Had a really interesting example related to this. Our e-reserve system, which is like TELUS, that kind of copyright monitoring system, whatever. One staff member and her teaching team is having trouble with it, and she declared the other day that they're just going to post all their PDFs on Blackboard now because e-reserve is just useless. It's not supporting our students, and it's caused one student to drop out because she's so annoyed at the technology that is being used and how it's interrupting her and these students are our students in this discipline, and this is how they work. And the underlying theme was, well, you don't understand how people in our discipline work, and they're in the profession, and we understand how hard it is for them, and everything we're doing is for them, and so all these readings have to be in this form, and e-reserve, the university system, isn't supporting that. Therefore, we're going to opt out of it. Of course, she's not going to be allowed to for many reasons, but that's an example of it. So there you go. There's a couple of examples from our data, and the U1, U2 just refers to the two different universities. The student school deficit discourse is all about, blame the students. It's not what it used to be. Students are not up to scratch. Don't know what they're doing down in the school area these days, but it wasn't like that in my day. Sorry, I'm really laying it on thick here. It probably doesn't necessarily come over that negatively. It could be quite subtle, but it's usually related to those sorts of issues. The sense that the students aren't good enough and they should be at a higher level. So academic staff development, if it's not addressing that issue, then I don't want anything to do with it, because strictly speaking, it's about the students and about the department and the way the university is run, not about my teaching. So don't expect me to engage with academic staff development. And I know that I'm sure there are lots of, I just saw Peter's comment, U1 has a few challenges, I think. Yes, that's good. Yeah. The skills discourse. This one is, as it says there, an instrumentalist view of teaching, that teaching actually is just a set of skills. You can learn the skills, you practice them, and that's it. So academic staff development has no place, or it has limited place to train us into how to do whatever, plan the lessons, plan the sessions, use Blackboard, get onto Zoom and train me how to use that mechanism. And once I've got that, I'm glad you're going to be in the office just in case something goes wrong, because after I've done that and I've learned how to run a lecture, everything's fine. So academic development, I don't know what they make such a fuss about that one for, because it's purely about training us to be technicians, teachers. So educational theory is irrelevant. And so that came through when the teachers or the staff were talking about evaluations as well, talking about their defensive reactions to the role that student evaluations generally play as a smiley face sheet, this kind of thing. It's not really informing anything, and we're just doing it. It might help me change my PowerPoints or something, but it's not really going to say much more. The performativity discourse is that discourse related to being, as it says there, under surveillance. I'm trying to follow the rules of the university, meet the demands of being employed here, demonstrating what I have to demonstrate to get through my probation and my confirmation and my promotion, and be accountable. So if academic staff development has any role, it has a role in helping me do that. How do I get through those processes? How do I meet the demands of my employer? So yes, teaching, I guess, has got something to do with that. Making use of the facilities that the university provides for me has to do with that. But yes, it's a very pragmatic. There's that element to it. It's very pragmatic, and but it doesn't tend to go beyond that in this type of discourse. So I don't know, you all can recognize those 4 discourses in various ways in your interactions with colleagues. In the paper, we talk a little bit about some of those nuances and how Quinn's 4 discourses, they seem to work really well for us. It possibly wasn't necessarily so cut and dry because, of course, an individual person might express a number of these discourses. So it wasn't that you could put person A into box A. or person B into box B. And the sort of crossover and the richness that naturally comes when you're dealing with people, it's not cut and dry. But we thought that the framework really helped to highlight some of these main reactions that we and others do encounter, and may help to explain why we encounter the neglect to our professional development, that or the resistance to anything that we try to put in place to help or to support or to engage. This slide I really like. I've used it numbers of times. Oh, this extract, and in relation to that other project and to the student evaluation one. And it seemed to resonate as well when I was thinking about the sorts of things that you here do as well. The institutions making judgments about, resourcing, about all sorts of practicalities, about creating really worthwhile learning environments for students, and great teaching environments for teachers. And I have faith that nobody at any level is out to make people's lives unhappy. It may seem it at times, but nobody wants to do that. But it's the way, so it doesn't matter what the institution's intentions are for anything. It's and it's also, I've added there in square brackets, it doesn't even matter about what the research evidence says, despite the fact that we're dealing with many times academics who insist on seeing the research to support something we're trying to introduce. Sometimes it flies in the face of that. It comes down to perceptions, and that in itself actually is quite a negative thing. I keep thinking, well, yeah, where does that take us? So I've written at the bottom there, but how? How do we change perceptions? What do? We have to face this all the time. It's good to understand things, and our paper actually only just revealed things. It didn't say anything much about what to do about them. And it's my pet peeve that many higher education research is about that. Let's dig around, find out how people are thinking, but very little about what to do about it. That's a generalization, I know. So I've just thrown here a little collection of models and ideas that I use. This one is quite old, 1996 there. Jim Butler from the University of Queensland, where he was back then, was very into reflection. And I really love this model he came up with in his paper in 1996. And he talked about there being a social side and a individual side to the context in which this is about teaching, teachers' work. And on the social side, there's public knowledge and there's professional practice. And these things are things in the literature. It's public knowledge. You can go and read about how to be a good teacher. You can read about what it is good to do as a practitioner. It's in there, but it's the translation of those into your own personal realm that is the hard part. And you, on the context self side, you've got your own personal knowledge, and added to that, you've got a worldview, your previous experience, your filters that you bring to everything and make sense of it. And you embed this public knowledge and professional practice into your own and make it your own through your action and your practice. And the catalyst to make these things happen is reflection. So for me, this is a fundamental diagram that just says, puts reflection as a really important activity to engage in some way. And of course, Butler talks about the different kinds of reflection and how to draw on the advantages of those to engage staff. This second model, sorry, I'm not very good at reading the stuff that's coming through on the chat. So please excuse me if I just plow on. I've looked at the clock too. Okay, this second model is one that we developed as part of the student evaluation project, and I realize some of the arrows have gone a bit skew if there, but it's simply describing the fact that on an institutional level, the institution is trying to do stuff, The institution exists in the blank beyond, outside that outer square as well, within the context of society, the country, many things. But within the institution, they try to translate the values that they explicate, their expectations, their mission, into some sort of practical implementation. Let's do this somehow. Right, we choose Blackboard over Moodle. Why? We choose this over that. We say we are going to do it in this way. We have e-vision. We have, e-reserve rather than Tallis. We have policies on this and that, how we interact, how we use our resources, and it goes on and on and on. And the institution trying to address the needs, try to enact its values and its mission, puts in place practical solutions. And then at the heart of it all is the individual and the groups of individuals with their beliefs, all sorts of things going on. And in the translation, stuff gets lost or changed. So this again is just mapping out and it helps me to remember where we're placed when we're dealing with whatever the resistance is about, whether it's an individual, whether it's a whole department or school, whether it's something about a policy or whatever, on whatever level. The next one, let's see if it's, no, this one has only come through. Oh no, it's compiled, it's just changed. Sorry, it's a bit messy, bit mucky there. All it's saying is that at the heart, when you're dealing with staff, academic staff, at the heart of what they do, of course, they're teachers, they're dealing with their field of study, they're dealing with the nature of teaching and learning, they're dealing with the nature of teaching and learning in their field of study. And I have to be frank and say, just because you're an expert, a physicist, doesn't mean to say you necessarily understand physics education. It's a different phenomenon. And even when anyway, I could talk about this till the cows come home, because I think it's so interesting. But you're trying to, as an academic staff developer in whatever field, from whatever angle you're coming at, you're trying to moderate, have a role to help the enrichment of this kind of process, or this thing here. And in blue there, around the triangle, are assumptions. As an academic staff developer, you have assumptions. The people you're dealing with, they have assumptions and perceptions, and and so it goes on. And finally, 3, this is a very simple one. As academic staff developers, we are engaged in process, we are experts, and we are resource people. Sometimes, if somebody says to me, I'm really having trouble with this, but you're talking about a teaching strategy, I'll go in there. I don't do it very often, but I'll go in there and show them. I'll demonstrate. See, this is how it could be. I'll create something in their Blackboard site. This is how it could be. I'll monitor and hold your hand for a little while. Sometimes I'll just send them to somebody, or I'll send them to a piece of literature. Sometimes I am the expert. Sometimes I take the back seat. You're juggling these 3 roles all the time. Sometimes it's setting up a process for them to engage with each other, to talk about their curriculum changes. Sometimes a person just needs to know the answer, and it's good to give it to them. It might give them the answer in the beginning, and they might not think anything of it other than, thank you, yes, that's done, tick. But I would always do it with the hope that maybe that's the thing that'll be the spark for them to start thinking on a different level about whatever their practice is or their question has been. And so, yes, it's quite complicated and very multi-leveled. And hence, as I said, I could talk about academic staff development for a long time, but I've bored you enough and I've taken up virtually all the time. So I'll stop. Does anybody have any questions? It would be good to read this chat because I can't keep up with it.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Can we take Sarah, please? We do have a couple of minutes left. So if I just take this from the bottom, there is a question there by Tom. Tom, do you want to ask that yourself, or?
Yes, I think there were lots of other questions. The one I was asking was, should we have academic staff development separate from learning support for students?
Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And it's changing, and at the moment we have in our institution we have, and they refuse to call themselves student learning they call themselves student learning development, and it's within the same unit. And I know that in lots of in theory, it's supposed to be, you know, you've got your evaluation, you've got your teaching support, you've got your, as in, you know, academic development support there, alongside the learning support for students, and it seems a logical place. But then what happens is the institutional structures get in the way. We used to have our student evaluation unit in there as well. It's since, in the last few months, been taken off and put over with the institutional research equivalent unit. So now it's extracted from so it's the same kind of argument. It's that practical implementation. I don't know where it sits best. I don't know whether there is a best, and maybe the best is whatever the institution can make sense of, with the people such as academics, staff developers and others championing a particular way to make it make sense within the context of that institution. As I say, I don't have an answer. I wonder if anybody does have an answer.
Well, I don't.
No, I know. So many permutations and combinations. In theory, I would think that, yes, it seems the most logical place to be.
Final question, because I'm just a bit wary of the time, but Kate's got her hand up.
In relation to what advocacy work we do collectively around.
Hello, hopefully my mic's working, it looks like it is.
Yes.
I was just noting that Chia had a question, so probably Chia should ask it. It was just around, I guess, what you might have as messages for us as TELedvisors, because we kind of, I guess, work in similar spaces, and what advocacy work we do collectively around academic development. And then I've just put another one around, I guess, for ongoing, just if people want to continue the discussion in Moodle, just around, I guess, how their roles, because we're all working in differing but overlapping roles. Does it conform to what they're, seeing, or are there other things that they're seeing? But yeah, I think Chia's question around, you might, I guess, how does this relate to what we do? And because I think there are some real overlaps across different roles these days.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. And I feel like you can never relax almost, because you're an advocate the whole time. You meet somebody in the corridor, or you're on this committee or that in that group, always saying something, and it might be the tiniest word that I really do believe you can make one passing comment and have quite a big impact on people. It might not happen immediately, but it happens. It can happen, but you never know. You don't like it all teaching, and this is definitely a form of teaching in my way of thinking. It's often a thankless job, and you don't necessarily know the impact of what you do. But being on those committees that count, without being a schmoozer and always preach it. You don't want to preach. It's not that. It's just always being ready to help, to question, to be in the right place, I guess. At the end of the day, it's not your problem. That sounds terrible. I mean, you can't change the world. Maybe that's not the way I'm supposed to see a job like this, but every little bit can help, and scratching at the surface does a great job. I don't know what I can say without really thinking about this to make a coherent kind of response, but I just feel like as an advocate, it's just everything you do, wherever you are, whoever you speak to, getting in with opportunities to say something without preaching, without saying it, understanding, being very empathetic and understanding that people are only there and isn't that great, without saying, let's go further. You can do that in a subtle way. Sometimes that's all they want at that point. Just leave them be. You know, you keep your ears and eyes open for opportunities, putting people together, using that those resources of people and literature and whatever, using your expertise and skills in those areas. So anyway, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was great. And thanks to Michael as well, if you're still there. This has been very interesting. I mean, there's a lot more we can talk about here, and there's there's some stuff in the chat room as well. The recording will be available soon. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you around for the next webinar, which will be at the normal time in the normal place, but there'll be messages going out about that. So thanks all. I'll stop the recording here, and hope to see you next time.